here's actually what one of the big problems with software, right? Is that starting in the 80s, so prior to the 80s, everybody was just trying to solve real problems and trying to get computers to solve real problems, right? And then starting around the 80s, computers got fast enough that you had a lot more leeway around how you solve the problems. And people started making all these theories about how to solve problems in the best way. And so object-oriented programming is like one of those theories, right? Oh, on the list of things in C++ that are wrong, object-oriented is wrong, right? Because of course, um, Alan Kay invented the term object-oriented, and it meant something else. It meant Smalltalk, not C++. So like even the term object-oriented is wrong the way people use it. Anyway, um, so people came up with all these ideas about how to program. And then the problem is those ideas require entire belief structures, right? So if you go to program in C++ object-oriented world representation style, then you start to believe from the way that you're taught that programming work is about building the hierarchy of objects in the right way or something. But that's not actually solving a problem. It's just conforming to a belief structure that you've been given. After you've decided on that hierarchy of objects, you still don't have a program that solves any problems. Now you have to go write the program within that framework that you decided on, right? And so the problem is, as we get further and further away from real actual problems, more and more of what is taught to people as programming is actually not doing anything. It's just shuffling papers around on your desk, right? And so like the question of how do I do an interface that blah, blah, blah is just shuffling the papers around on your desk because it's not actually solving a problem. Like what I would say is write the editor and then write the plugins or whatever, write the functionality, make all the functionality work. And then if you're dispatching between them with an if statement and it feels kind of hacky and you need more abstraction for a very concrete reason, then put in a function pointer. But I wouldn't even do that. I would just have an if statement that turns them on or off for a long time because it's actually a relatively, that part of writing an editor is so small and so minor in terms of what it solves that I wouldn't even bother for a long time. On the other hand, if you buy into a weird structure or many weird structures, which is what happens, in order to preemptively solve this very small problem before it becomes a problem, you end up taking on all these very large belief structures that are actually very hard to conform to. And you have to conform to those belief structures all the time because that's what you made your program be. And it actually gives you a much bigger job to do than you actually have to do to solve the actual physical problem that you have in the objective world. All right. So that's the best thing that I can say about this. I don't know how to explain it better. Am I against conceptual models for programming languages in general? Not in general, but I think that people have gotten the wrong idea about them the past few decades. I think they're being used in ways that are not good. For example, by all the people who want to put the maximum amount of UB into your compiler as they can. That's a terrible abuse. Like literally though, my advice about programming very generally is it's fine to know about all these things that people say about how to structure a program. But if you don't have a program yet, you don't have a structural problem to solve yet. So first make sure you have a program that does something interesting. And then if you need to solve something, you can refactor it to solve that problem. But most of these things that people say, they're not good. How should you implement code which handles some back-end logic with different client architectures? If you want to compile both clients and backend in one binary and provide user an option to dynamically switch. What's wrong with a function pointer? Why is this hard? What you just said is a function pointer. Like, what's the problem? Maybe I just don't understand it just seems like a really weird question. Like, people act like these things are hard. Like, dude, we've been doing this shit since 1960, all right? Like, what? I'm sorry. It's just, what's really frustrating is not this particular question. It's, again, the massive amount of weird programming propaganda that has built up over decades and that shows itself in this question, right? You don't think it's propaganda. You think people don't know how virtual works behind the scene. I think that's correct that people don't know how it works. But part of the propaganda is you're not supposed to know how it works. Both to give implementations maximal freedom, but also because a high-level cultured programmer doesn't need to know how it works. We program to the C++ memory model, which doesn't actually have anything to say about that or whatever. I mean, that's not quite right. C++ memory model is about something different, but you know what I'm saying. So that's the thing is, so all these software engineering methodologies, they have good intentions, right? Like, they were trying to actually solve problems. It's not like they made up some random crap. They were trying to solve problems. It's just a lot of the time the solution doesn't work or is worse than the original problem was. It's like, yes, if the software engineering methodology ends up in you having to type more code than before, it's probably bad in the long run because, again, if the problem is managing all the code and understanding all the code and well enough to modify it, then more code would seem to make things worse, wouldn't it? Right? That includes something like TDD. You've got this code. Now you've got all these tests. You've got 5 times as many test codes as non-test. Somebody has to understand and maintain all that stuff, right? Like, it makes it worse. Like, it's not a coincidence that programmers can't get anything done today. We've made people do things in a way that they're doing. Yeah, they can't.